You wake up, you check your phone, you scroll through messages, then you get dressed, then you commute, then you sit at a desk for 8 hours doing something that has a job title. This feels normal. It is not. For most of human history, there was no such thing as a job, no clock to punch, no boss to answer to, no Monday. So what did your ancestors actually do with their time every single day for hundreds of thousands of years? The answer is far stranger than you think. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins studied hunter-gatherer societies in the 1960s and reached a conclusion that shocked economists. He called them the original affluent society, not because they had more stuff, because they had more time. Sahlins found that hunter-gatherers like the Jew Huansi of the Kalahari spent roughly 15 to 20 hours a week securing food. That's it. Compare that to the average modern work week. Your ancestors were, in a very real sense, working less than you. So what filled the rest of their hours? Mostly they rested, they told stories, they made tools, slowly and carefully with no deadline pressure. They groomed each other the way primates do, strengthening social bonds through touch and conversation. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied the Jew Honsi decades later and found that after dark, almost all their conversation shifted away from practical matters like food or disputes. Instead, 80% of nighttime talk was storytelling, myths, jokes, songs about distant relatives and distant lands. Think about that. Your ancestors spent their evenings doing something that looks remarkably like what you do when you watch television. Daytime looked different depending on the season and the landscape. Foraging for plants, roots, and insects took up a significant portion of the day, often done by women and children in small groups. Hunting was less frequent than you'd expect, sometimes only a few times a week, and it often failed. Meat was a bonus, not a guarantee. Children weren't sent to school. They learned by watching, by playing, by tagging along. Play itself was the curriculum. A child throwing a stick wasn't wasting time. He was training his hands for a spear he'd need in 10 years. There was no concept of free time because there was no concept of work time to separate it from. Anthropologist Richard Lee, who lived among the Jew/Huansi in the 1960s, documented something else surprising. Naps were common. Long, unhurried naps in the middle of the day when the sun made movement unwise anyway. Here's the twist that should unsettle you. This way of life wasn't a primitive starting point. Humanity was desperate to escape. It was stable. It lasted for roughly 300,000 years, the vast majority of Homo sapiens' existence on Earth. The agricultural revolution, the one that gave us crops, surplus property, and eventually jobs, is only about 12,000 years old. In the long timeline of your species, the office is a blink. The campfire is almost everything, and agriculture, contrary to what you might assume, didn't make life easier. Skeletal remains studied by researchers like Jared Diamond reveal that early farmers were often shorter, more malnourished, and worked longer hours than the foragers who came before them. Settling down meant storing food, which meant something worth stealing, which meant defending it, which meant hierarchy, ownership, and eventually somebody telling somebody else what to do with their day. That's the real birth of the job, not human nature, circumstance. Your ancestors weren't lazy and they weren't primitive. They were efficient. They worked when work was necessary and rested when it wasn't, because their bodies and minds evolved for exactly that rhythm. Bursts of effort, long stretches of recovery, deep social connection in between. Your brain still expects that rhythm. It's why 8 straight hours at a desk feels unnatural, even when you can't explain why. It's why a 5-minute conversation with a coworker feels more restorative than 5 more minutes of scrolling. It's why you crave a nap at 2 p.m. and feel guilty for wanting one. You're not broken. You're ancient. The Jew/Huansi didn't have a word that translates directly to job. They had something closer to the things that need doing, which left room for everything else: rest, story, laughter, each other. Somewhere between the first wheat field and your last performance review, that space got smaller and smaller.
So the next time you feel exhausted by a system that demands 40 plus hours a week and calls anything less laziness, remember this. For 300,000 years, your species thrived on 15. You didn't lose your work ethic. You lost your evenings around the fire. And tonight, when you finally close your laptop, sit for a moment before you check your phone again, that restlessness you feel, that urge to fill the silence, that's not weakness. That's an ancient mind, built for community and rest, trying to remember what it was actually built for. Smash that subscribe button and hit like right now. What hit different? Drop a comment, and I'll see you next time.